Hello, Virgo, and welcome to the Dharma, your 2020 spring reading from Planet Waves. My name is Eric Francis Coppolino here with a look at your astrology for the time being. And actually, I'm going to start with something that I have considered to be one of the foundational themes of an understanding of Virgo by way of understanding its solar chart. As you know, the charts I use for these type of readings are the solar chart, and it's a special chart that works with the sign that I'm doing as the reference, meaning as the first house. So it's not really the rising sign, it's more the first house, and what I found is these work quite well for the sign, the rising sign, and people say they are pertinent to the moon sign as well. And if you were to imagine this this chart without any planets in it, and just the way the signs are organized, you would see, as you can see here, that when we use Virgo as the reference point, Gemini comes out on top of the chart, and that is noteworthy, relevant, meaningful, and I find interesting. On top of the chart means in the 10th house. The 10th house pertains to one's career. It pertains to one's reputation. It pertains to one's sense of calling. It is about one's relationship to the corporate and government power structure, and has a lot to do with one's relationship to one's family. And then additionally, it is what you aspire to in the highest sense of aspiration. And most books will tell you that it means fame. The thing is that I've done quite a few celebrity horoscopes of quite famous people, and I'm impressed by how often the 10th house is not involved, and yet the person is somehow incredibly famous. And so this fame property of the 10th is I'm a little bit skeptical of it. It can be there. I mean, it can be there, and people with a strong 10th are often well known in some way, but it's not a requirement. In any event, it's a pertinent topic right now at the 10th house and the 10th house in Gemini, because Venus is retrograde there. Now, I didn't quite finish my analysis of my analysis of the idea of having Gemini on the 10th house. And one of the things I think is most important for those who have Gemini on the 10th is to make sure that they have two careers. It's going to happen that way normally. However, it's a very important psychic vent and an honoring of your nature to do two things where you have Gemini in your chart, to express that both ways. So with Pisces on the ascendant, Pisces as a reference point, Gemini comes out on the bottom of the chart in the house of one's home and one's grounding. And I have had good success discussing with Pisces people the idea of having two places that they can be, whether it's a home and an office, or two homes, or a place you can go to get a break from one place. It might be a friend's house. It might be where you feel really at home, where you can actually be at home. It might be an Airbnb where you're able to go one weekend a month. There's a lot of possibilities. But that double nature of Gemini calls for being honored. And where you have it happens to be, let's get a little more light on the subject here, my sophisticated lighting system made of curtains. Where you have Gemini is on the 10th house. And so you want to work this idea of having two callings. And you probably have in some way. Now, the problem with having two callings is that some people really struggle with this, and they don't know what they really are. And some people still feel punished for having two specialties. I think that we are pretty well past that in the world now, that there is very little specialization that happens, and everyone is expected to have 10 talents. But there was a time in my lifetime when people were punished for being two things, and they weren't fully accused of not being fully committed, as is sometimes said to happen with bisexuals. You're not fully committed to either camp, and therefore maybe you don't know what you're doing. But then there are the people who are polyvalent. There are people who just can express themselves several ways excellently. Here's the thing now. The retrograde of Venus in Gemini, in your 10th house, which takes place from May 13 out through June 25, is calling for you to reconcile those two things and to work the common ground that they share, and to, more than the common ground, to go to a level that you might think of as higher. It's not really higher, but it's a bit beyond both of them, where you can see that the things that you do are all expressions of the same thing, and are all expressions of your inherent need and desire to be of service. Okay, so even beyond that, Venus retrograde in your 10th house is it's a calling to reconsider the whole idea of what you're doing on this planet, and what you want to accomplish, and what you have accomplished. And that includes thinking back on what you may have given up for some other priority that you now want to reclaim. So this is a deep introspective thing. And one of the things I have seen is true when people are making their professional decisions, is that very often they don't know what they're getting into, and they don't quite understand why they're doing what they're doing, including people who choose academic programs, not fully understanding what the academic program is really about, who enter fields where they're not really understand the nature of the field in which they'll be working. Now, I realize that that's that there's an element of surprise for any project, but you don't always know where you're going to end up. But on the other hand, one of the things that we suffer from in our society right now is a lack of apprenticeship. There's a lack of a test phase for most people. Young people are not so often encouraged to actually do something productive with their time, and are often given the prerogative to basically entertain themselves to death through school. And then school is not really more than, for many people, going to classes and partying, whereas all of that time spent partying could just as well be spent exploring one's Dharma, what one wants to do. So I don't know how you got into what you do, or whether you like what you do or feel like you're valued for what you do. However, the retrograde of Venus through your 10th house is helpful. It's going to give you time to rethink things, and we've all gone through this and are still going through this slowdown, shutdown, lockdown, depending on where you are, of the society that we live in. And I think that of its own, this has forced a lot of people to reconsider the possibilities, and to decide if they miss what they were doing before. And in addition, this wildly rearranged economy is going to force people to be more clever about finding the right thing to do. There's plenty that needs to be done. There's plenty that you want to accomplish. And I would encourage you to just take this time and to reflect, and in particular to reflect on the bivalent nature of your being, the side of yourself that likes to express yourself in multiple ways, and to keep that in mind as you go through this soul-searching process. The fact that Venus is making a series of conjunctions to Vesta in Gemini. The first one was a couple of weeks ago. The second one will be in a couple of weeks when Venus retrogrades over Vesta and moves over Vesta in retrograde motion. Right, just to see how that looks. Venus is there. It's got a bit of a higher degree number than Vesta. I think 1 degree ahead. It's going to retrograde back over Vesta and make a second conjunction, and then a third conjunction much later in the year in Leo. So this process goes on for a while, but the concentrated part, the heart of the matter, is in the spring for you. The question is, what do you really need to devote yourself to? Vesta is there's a couple of ways to address the idea of Vesta on the most comprehensive level, and one of those is about true devotion. And another is an organizing principle. And so you can work with both of those. The idea that Vesta is the thing that you most want to devote yourself to, and the other is the organizing principle of your professional life and your professional calling. Not the task, not the activity, but the organizing principle, the central concept around which everything is organized. Kind of like a home is organized around the kitchen, or in the old days was organized around the hearth, which is where that came from. Because when you succeed at something, you are going to need to devote yourself to it. I mean, that's what happens. And not only that, if you succeed and completely willingly devote yourself to it, you're going to do a lot of what you succeed at. And so one of the things I'm suggesting is that you plan for success. And planning for success means choosing an activity that is choosing an activity that you just simply like. And this is not always done. This is not often done. There's one other thought here, which is that just slipped right out of my mind. Well, let's add a new idea, which is that often there is an idea that what one chooses to do professionally has got to make them survive in some way. It may be that your true calling is not the thing that is able to pay the bills. And I suggest that you not confuse true calling with the thing that is able to pay the bills. I will tell you that if I didn't like to do this work, if I didn't love to do this work, and I didn't love to work with people, which pretty much keeps me busy 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, you couldn't pay me enough to do it. And the fact that I fully engage myself and I don't really care how long it takes has nothing to do with the money involved. But when you find something that you care about that much, when you find something that comes so that deeply from within your soul, and Vesta comes from within your soul. I mean, this is a crucial thing to remember. That fire burning in the chevron of Vesta is you tending the fire of your soul. You need to be creative enough to find a way to make that work financially, if you're going to make it financially, and rather than struggle with that, this is the part where it's necessary to be brutally practical, and ask yourself, what is the actual value of the thing you do? And you might find that you can't think of the actual value, that is to say, to others, meaning to clients and employers, people who would pay you. Therefore, you have to figure out a way to sponsor your calling yourself. And maybe along the way, you will figure out a way to make it work for you financially. So I would just suggest not confusing them. There's one other thought, and that is the one that I almost forgot. That the thing that you feel the most deeply called upon to do may be something you feel like you have to make a sacrifice for. And I would suggest having a long talk with yourself about this idea that you have to make a sacrifice, what that sacrifice would be, and most importantly, whether it is true. You need in this process to do a lot of asking yourself whether it's true. The reason for that being, I'll draw this in a color I haven't used in this chart yet, so it's a little easier to see. I'm using my fake golden $100 bill as a ruler. The only reason I like $100 bills is because I'm a fan of Benjamin Franklin, because the building I'm in wouldn't still be standing if he had not invented the lightning rod. And I don't have bifocals yet. My eye doctor advised me against that. Venus is in this long square to Neptune. So it's currently, as of today, I'm recording this on the 30th, applying in a square to Neptune. And then it's going to slow down and station retrograde in a square to Neptune. It's going to come back and make a conjunction to Vesta and still be in a square to Neptune. And so as part of this retrograde process, and whatever it is that it represents, whatever this self-inquiry process is, and this reevaluation process that, fortunately you have company in the reevaluation process. The society we're in has been forced into a reevaluation. You're going to need to keep asking yourself if your observations are true, and also taking your assumptions and attempting to disprove them. I'm not saying this to instill doubt in any way. I'm saying it to inspire you to be a more critical thinker, and to deepen your process of inquiry, and so to make sure that you're being honest with yourself. It's very important that you have a reference frame for doing that, and one of the ways that you do that is you find the ways where you tend to slip a little bit on the matter of honesty with yourself, and make sure that you place markers there so that you can do a check-in. I'll give you an example. In addition to the Venus retrograde this year, there's going to be a Mars retrograde this year. And the Mars retrograde highlights one of the most salient ideas about Virgo from the solar chart, right up there with having Gemini on the 10th, is having Aries on the 8th. Now, let's talk about that without any planets. So what this means is you have Virgo starting here as your first place, and then you go round and round following the signs in order, and you wind up with Aries on house 8. And so that means that all of the thematic matter of the 8th house is going to be taken in the style of Aries. And in the style of Aries means a relentless quest for who you are. Wherever anyone has Aries on their chart, this goes for the solar chart, it goes for the natal chart, and then it'll also apply to some event type charts. They're going to seek themselves. And with Aries on the 8th, where you tend to seek yourself is in deeply committed partnerships of some kind. It has been at times in life almost as if you didn't exist without the deeply committed partnership. There are many people who will state this outright, that they don't feel like they exist without a partnership, because that reflexive quality of the relationship is so important to them. And then there's incredible pressure from society to claim your existence through some form of marriage or marriage-like partnership. I once lived on an island, which tend to have very intense cultures, and for most of the time I was on the island, I didn't have a partner. And then for a period of time, I did have a partner. And whether it was my imagination or not, I felt like I was treated completely differently, because I had a partner who was a well-known person on the island, well-known, well-respected person, and then I was treated as somebody. So the pressure comes from family, it comes from friends, it comes generally from the culture, it comes from the movies we watch, and all kinds of sources. But for Virgo, there's that insertion of self, Aries, into the region of the deep and total exchange in a partnership. Sorry if that went by too fast. There's a copy of the chart probably right below this video. Okay, now there are 3 main, let's say, reasons astrologically why this particular issue has been thrust into the forefront right now. In approximate order, the first of those is that you have Chiron now in your 8th house, solar house in Aries. And where Chiron arrives, it's going to often create some kind of a fuss or crisis or focal point of your life that causes a rearrangement of some kind, as if Chiron is a vortex calling all this energy to it and attention to it. And it also precipitates a healing process where you suddenly discover that maybe you have some work to do. You have something that you need to devote yourself to. And so Chiron is there. And one of the things Chiron has been doing has been, I'm not sure if you gave it this name, and you might have seen some of my coverage of this topic of the sorry, I've been talking a lot these days, of the connection between Chiron and some activity involving the family in Capricorn. And this is a reminder that a lot of the pressure to be partnered in this society, and possibly for you, is the pressure to seem sexually appropriate, to not seem like you're too much of a floozy or whatever, because only because there's not someone who you claim as your own, or who claims you as their own. It's archaic, it's fucking stupid, but the way these cultural imprints work is so dark and insidious. And then there are so many people who just regurgitate the conditioning without even stopping to hear quite exactly what it is that they just said, or question whether this is even a valid way to live. And so there is a restraint in Virgo that in part comes from massive family pressure and conditioning to always seem appropriate, always seem perfect, and not to be too playful. One of the real struggles with Virgo that I would just, offer my hand to help you out of that if you think that that's afflicted you, is this robbing of your sense of your child. Your inner child, meaning I just say inner, I say your kid. The kid that you are and the kid that you were who's still inside of you wants to be free and wants to experiment in life and wants to not have all of these people telling you what to think and how you're supposed to look and how you're supposed to act all the time. So there is a kind of a divestiture going on. And this really impressive retrograde of Mars, right, goes out to 28 degrees of Aries, and then retrogrades back. Mars retrogrades don't go so far. Maybe it's like 10 or 12 degrees, and then stations direct. And it includes the complete passage of the sign of Aries in 5.5 months. Mars is going to spend in total from early July out to early January in Aries. And so and it does a lot while it's there. It's going to make a lot of aspects. There's a lot of things hanging around on the cardinal cross right now. I mean, just for example, Mars is going to make aspects to everything in Aries. That's including Chiron and Salacia, which enhances the theme of sexual appropriateness and how you handle yourself and what is your whole concept of your sexuality and your concept of your sexuality in relationships and out of relationships. There's going to be 3 conjunctions to Eris, right? The direct, the retrograde, and then the direct. That's how these things work. Then, while all that's going on, there's going to be there's going to be squares to Pholus and Quaoar, these family factors in Capricorn here, and then squares to Jupiter and Pluto, and then there's all these interesting things in Cancer here that I'm probably not going to get into up in the 11th, but they're like these. They're in the planets without bodies category of the Uranian points that I'm always watching, but I don't talk about too much. And then Logos in Libra, which is your ethical framework around money and the role of money in relationships. All of this is going to get agitated by Mars retrograde. It's a big shakeup, and the shakeup, as I would sum it up, if I had to give the elevator pitch for the shakeup, it's about you establishing your independence from all of these things outside of you, where you have either sought to find your identity or where others have attempted to impose an identity on you, cultural forces and relationship forces of whatever kind they may be. So that retrograde of Mars happens later in the year. And so this is a major year of reevaluation for you, where you are reevaluating your highest goals, and also the way that you offer yourself to your most intimate relationships. Now, I've had a lot to say about work, and I have a bit more to say about work. And the theme of this work part, it's probably all we'll have time to cover, but it will be plenty. We made some tracks today through the sky. Is apropos of the theme that you must love what you do. You must love what you do, and your commitment must be a calling. No one can be an herbalist unless the plants call them. It's not an activity. It's a calling. Speaking as a journalist, I will tell you that my stories choose me. I don't pick the stories I write. I mean, sometimes I'll write one article because I feel like writing it. When I say a story, I mean the kind of thing that drags me in for 5 years. I don't just decide I'm going to pick a topic and then get dragged in for 5 years. The topic picks me. This is what you're looking for. And so you're, and I hear people talk about the trouble they have with this and how they don't hear the calling. And I would suggest that, hearing the calling is potentially as loud as your willingness to listen. One of the things about Virgo that's so crucial, another one of these kind of like top shelf solar chart facts. I think if I write my solar chart book, I'll start with Virgo because it's the one that I understand and appreciate the most. Is that you have to work in collaboration with people. I mean, there is no getting around that. And usually when you're working in collaboration with people, you end up being the most intelligent, the most committed, and the most organized person. This makes it hard for you to suffer fools. And so you need to structure your world now in such a way that you get the collaboration piece, because you need to work in a system of some kind. You're not made to be a lone actor. Now there are times when people have to just you might have all kinds of collaborators and colleagues and friends, and then you just have to lock yourself in a room for 6 months and write something. Not that likely, but it might happen. But ultimately, most of what you do through establishing a system of some kind. You do through establishing a method, and the method involves others necessarily. And so you need to have the confidence to do that. And if you take it from nobody but me, the confidence to understand that you are capable and qualified to do this, and that it would be very helpful if you overcame the insecurity that could possibly lead you to believe that you're not properly qualified to do what you do. There's ways to figure out how qualified you are, and that includes like look around and see what other people are saying and doing. But ultimately, you have to have faith in yourself, and part of having that faith in yourself is gradually allowing yourself not to be so influenced by the need to have the reassurance of others. When you're working in a group environment, there are real challenges in that environment. There are difficulties. There's the whole human dimension, and to coexist in the human dimension, particularly in a leadership role, and particularly in the kind of leadership role where you function not as the top, but in a central position, right? There's the kind of pyramid style of leadership, and then you can imagine whole piece of paper. Let's use the March calendar. Where you might be in the center, and there's other people around you. So instead of a pyramid style, right? Pyramid style, top down, typical American style. You imagine yourself more in the center, and then you are relating to all these people, and then they have relationships with each other, and you kind of organizing a web of effort and intelligence, as opposed to a military style command structure. With Gemini on the 10th, that does not that's not particularly suggestive of a military style command structure, as it is suggestive of a communication structure, and where you get the people around you speaking the same language. And that's one way to think of it, is to have in organizing a system or a method, to have your own concept of a kind of a lexicon, of a dictionary that everyone knows what the words mean, and that serves two purposes. One, it serves a communication purpose of conveying ideas, but it also focuses the idea of a group of people who are qualified. And to do this well, you need to have your communication structure down with yourself well, and that's a large part of Venus retrograde in Gemini, is the idea of having your own idioglossia, your own unique language with which you communicate with yourself, and then you get that down so impeccably that you're able to share it and expand that with others, and make interesting things happen. And you do have interesting things that you want to make happen. And I think that for you, the astrology process that's really going to set the tone is this Venus retrograde in your 10th, wherein you do some soul searching, and that's not a day or a week. We're really looking at about a 2-month process, potentially a little bit longer, where you ask yourself what the world is calling you to accomplish, and what your soul is calling you, calling you to accomplish, and sit with that for a while, hear that for a while, listen to yourself, and enter a dialogue with yourself, and slowly acclimate yourself to the calling and what you need to do to respond to it. And of course, ultimately, especially with Venus leading this investigation, what you love is important. What you naturally, organically are drawn to love matters the most of all. And I would add that what you hold as the most beautiful thing about yourself, about the world, about some task or project is also a thing that should deeply inform you. And what I'm really talking about here is sussing this out in a way that brings to the equation your full emotional intelligence, your ability to think of the truth as an idea, but to also feel the truth in as a vibration, as a feeling tone, and as a kind of an aesthetic. The truth, as we're talking about it right now, must be beautiful to you. And if you are able to proceed in an honest and sincere way, there are great things coming. I don't care what a mess the world is or may be. The idea that we're rearranging everything right now and rearranging all of these economic relationships and business relationships and the whole structure of society and all of these big entities are going to be floundering because largely what they, no pun intended, but largely what they ran on was their bigness and their ability to dominate, and that is changing. Okay, good to work with you. Don't forget to check in with your sign rising if it's not not Virgo, and also if you want to share this video or others with someone that you care about because you think they might benefit, or it might benefit you to have them have the information. Of course, you're welcome to do that. All right. Thank you for your trust and your business, and I'll catch you over at a different sign. Bye for now.